Welcome everybody for joining us. This event's being hosted by Bike Cleveland. For those of you that don't know what or who Bike Cleveland is, we're the region's bicycle and pedestrian advocacy and education organization. We work with communities and individuals and organizations to build infrastructure and educate folks on how to ride safely. We are a membership-based organization, so if you aren't a member or you're not sure if your membership's current, I encourage you all to go to our website and become a member, or if you're not sure if your membership's current, you can email Deltrice at Bike Cleveland. It's just Deltrice at bikecleveland.org to find out if you need to renew your membership. I want to introduce Ken Knabe. So Ken is Cleveland's bike attorney. He's a trials attorney whose specialty is in protecting the rights of injured cyclists. He's our go-to whenever we hear about anybody that's unfortunately been injured while riding a bicycle, and always pulls through for us. He's always supported cycling and cyclists. He's a Bike Cleveland corporate sponsor for a very long time. He has co-authored our Bikes in the Law section on Bike Cleveland's website, a great resource if you ever have any questions about cycling law and where cyclists stand amidst riding in the road with cars. Ken's also been key in advancing the City of Cleveland's Vision Zero initiative, meeting with me and another attorney along with Councilman Zone to get it started a little under 2 years ago. And he's subcommittee co-chair of the Maintenance and Fleet Vehicles Subcommittee of the Vision Zero Task Force. He sits on the board of the Ohio Bicycle Federation and the board of the Ohio to Erie Trail. Of course, Ken is an avid cyclist. I've run into him a number of times biking with my kids down on the towpath and through the city streets. So I'm sure many of you have probably run into him as well. But amongst that list of notable accomplishments, we can also add to that list an author. As many of you know, and while you're here, Ken recently authored a book called Cycling Rights, Bicycles, E-Bikes, and Micro-Mobility Devices. I've had a chance to read it. It's a great resource and a lot of great stories about cycling rights and how to stay safe out on the road, and a lot of some of the history around cycling as well. So I encourage you guys all to pick up a copy, and I'll share where you can pick them up in a little while. All right, so I held up the book. There's a copy of it. Jason's going to throw in the chat where you can purchase a copy of this book. Ken has graciously donated a number of books to Bike Cleveland that you can purchase on Bike Cleveland's website. And actually all proceeds of the sales go to support Bike Cleveland's work for safe streets. So I encourage you all to hop in there and purchase a copy for yourself. With that, I want to introduce Ken Knabe, who's here with us. You can all, if you want, up on the top of your screen, you can go over to speaker view and you will see Ken alone while he speaks. So I encourage you guys all to do that. So to start, Ken, how are you doing today?
I'm doing excellent, Jacob. It is an absolutely gorgeous day, and I thank everybody that made it to this virtual book launch. It almost looks as if Jacob and I are downtown Cleveland today, but that's actually my book cover in the background.
Excellent. So Ken, tell us, what's the story behind why you wrote your book?
Well, it's a good question, Jacob. As you know, I am a cyclist, and I've been sincerely into cycling for about 15 years. And I'd like to think I'm battle tested. In other words, I'm on the road. I see what happens on the road. I see what happens with the interactions with drivers and cyclists. I see what issues we encounter on the road. And I'm subject to those same issues as all other cyclists. But when I'm out on the road, I'm thinking of it in a legal and a practical sense. Every time I'm on the road, I'm thinking, why is this happening? Why is this person doing this? Why are we doing this? How do we react to that? And it just kind of became part of my modus operandi when I would ride. And then I also realized that, a lot of people don't know what the bike laws are, motorists especially, and a lot of cyclists. And I thought, I learned this maxim in law school that ignorance of the law is no excuse. And so I thought, I need to get out there and give the knowledge to the cyclists about what their rights are on the road and what their responsibilities are so that they can have the power. And with knowledge comes power. And I wrote this book to empower cyclists and other vulnerable road users to be safer on the road so that they can have a better understanding of what they can do, should do, and should not do. And I wrote this book for all types of cyclists. If you're a short recreational cyclist, or if you're a commuter, or if you're a road warrior, it doesn't matter. Or if you just ride the trails, this book will help any cyclist in any category. It's a quick, good read, and that's why I wrote it, to give us some knowledge and some power.
Excellent. Yeah. If anybody on the call has ever actually joined us for one of the Bikes and the Law talks that Ken does, he's got a plethora of information and a lot of great stories that really tell about cyclist rights and some kind of firsthand experiences that he's had. One of my favorite parts of the book is when you talk about the Stobie shout. I always love that story. Do you want to mention it real quick for folks that haven't heard that story yet?
Gary Stobie and I grew up in the same neighborhood in Cleveland's West Side here, in the West Park area. We both went to St. Vincent de Paul grade school, played on the same team. High school, he goes to Holy Name, I go to Ignatius. We play against each other, we stay friends. Years later, I'm in college, he's got a 68 Chevy. Back in those days, all the cars sucked. There was always something wrong with the car, and his horn never worked. So I'd be out riding with Gary in the metro parks in a 68 Chevy. Someone would pull out in front of him, and Gary would do the Stobie shout, "Hey!" And these people would actually hear him without a horn, and they would stop. So that was the genesis of the Stobie shout rule. And his picture's in the book. And that's the only picture I took that Keith Baird didn't. But you can see him inside the book. He's a real character, and I love plugging that guy.
Nice. Yeah, so in terms of the book, can you describe a little bit about what the process was like?
Yes, the book started about 2 years ago when I decided I was going to write this book. And I would go out with photographer Keith Baird to various sites around the city. I'd be on my bike. Keith and Linda Barbaric would be in the car, and they'd photograph me in the bike boxes, at the bike lane that we see in the cover of the book, and in other areas of the city. And then time went on and on. Keith said, "Hey, where's the book? When are you going to publish this book?" And I go, "Keith, there are things happening out there." And three of the things that happened that delayed the publication of the book were the introduction of e-bikes. All of a sudden, e-bikes are on the scene. Well, people should know what e-bikes are, what classes they are. That's part of the book. Then the next thing we have Birdgate. Bird drops 1,000 micro-mobility e-scooters in downtown Cleveland, all hell breaks loose. So what are they? What are the rules concerning micro-mobility devices like e-scooters, Bird, Lime? And then, of course, we have the pandemic. And with that pandemic came a couple unexpected consequences, one of which was a major cycling boom. Less cars on the road, more people on the road, more time on their hands, more time to cycle. The governor of the state of Ohio declares bike shops as an essential business. So all those three things happened that we all incorporated into the book, and we kind of added chapters, and it delayed the process. So Lisa Green, who goes by Parker of Parker Mulholland LLC, come on in here if you can actually get in here. It's a little hard to. There she is.
Thanks for being here.
We would sit down in the conference room week by week, going over the book, going over the chapters. We get each chapter done, and we move on to the next, and all of a sudden we've been incorporating new laws, circumstances, and ideas. And finally, we were getting close to getting it done, but we couldn't get over the hump. It was just a long process, and I hired Rob Thompson as a summer intern. Rob came in with a lot of new energy. He's a Cat 1 cyclist. He's a law student. He ran a bike shop. And we all got together, the three of us. And I would arbitrate between Lisa and Rob as to what was in and what was out of the book. Any questions about English grammar, both Rob and I would defer to Lisa Parker, who is so good in grammar. There's not one mistake in that book. She's unbelievable. So we'd always defer to her. And so finally, we got over the hump, and I'm so glad about the book, and it came out way better than I expected, and I'm very happy with it.
Excellent, excellent. Is there anybody else that you collaborated with on the book? Any other shout outs you'd like to give?
Yeah, I really would. Besides Bear that I mentioned, Parker, Rob, and Linda, I want to shout you out, Jacob, because you have given me a lot of good input in that book and a lot of good suggestions. And I see you a lot in the Vision Zero calls, and you always do a great job. You're very impressive down there in the city. I also want to thank Jacob Kuhn and Deltrice Daniels of Bike Cleveland. Now, I want to really say I love these people. These people walk the walk, they talk the talk for cyclist safety and advocacy in the city of Cleveland. I've seen them perform many, many times, and it's all sincere, and they really care about what happens in the city streets of Cleveland. And I want to shout out you guys first. I also want to shout out Ashley Shaw, who's the Director of Neighborhood Planning at Ohio City, and she's the co-chair of the Vision Zero Enforcement Committee. She got hit by a driver and suffered a brain injury, and has given talks about the consequences to her because of that are so deeply moving that I would see on the enforcement committee, the police, the viewpoints of cyclists changed when they heard Ashley's story. They are more empathetic. They're more eager to help cyclists, thanks to Ashley. I want to shout her out. There's Matt Zone, who started the Vision Zero along with Jacob, myself, and Andy Young. A great guy. Matt has left to become with Western Reserve to help us return to a forest city, the tree canopies in the city. Great guy, great person. I want to thank Callie Mersman. She's the bicycle and pedestrian coordinator for the city of Cleveland. She is top notch, excellent, knows her stuff. I have called on her resources many, many times. Also, Ann Tilley in the City of Cleveland Research and Policy Analyst. She's a writer. She's out there. She cares. She's on the Vision Zero subcommittee. Matt Moss has been great. He's a city planner. He has helped Jacob work on the high injury network. This is the network where most of the bike accidents happen in Cleveland that Jacob and Matt have plotted out on Bike Cleveland's website. I want to thank Freddie Collier, Director of City Planning, for what he did in Birdgate and how he has been so instrumental in the Vision Zero legislation to be. Nancy Desmond is on the subcommittee that I chair along with Terrell Cole, and she has been a great help sharing information on vehicle maintenance with the great metro parks in the city of Cleveland. Darnell Brown is the Chief Operating Officer of the city of Cleveland. Excellent. He is pursuing Vision Zero at the head of the table at every meeting. I want to thank Terrell Cole. He's my co-chair. He's the Deputy Chief Operating Officer and co-chair of the Fleet and Maintenance Committee. I work with Terrell a lot. Great guy, very knowledgeable, very helpful. I want to shout out to all the Ohio Bicycle Federation directors for all the input that I get from them. Chuck Smith, the head, Sharon Montgomery, that helped me on distracted driving. My colleague, Steve Magus, want to thank all of them. I want to thank all the OTET directors, that's the Ohio Trail directors, that are always giving me great information. And finally, I'm not going on too long, I want to thank Andy Young, my colleague and friend, who has been instrumental in putting side guards on trucks in the city of Cleveland that prevents cycle underride. Andy has just been outstanding in that area and has put his own money in for 15 side guards with the city of Cleveland. And I just wanted to make sure I got those shout outs out.
Excellent. Yeah, a lot of really great people there to get some input on for the book. For those folks on the Zoom who don't have a copy of the book, again, you can purchase it from Bike Cleveland's website. The link's in the chat. But could you just talk a little bit about what the book's about, and give folks an idea?
Sure, Jacob. The book is about cycling rights. And at one point we had that S in parentheses because it means two things. It's what are the rights of cyclists? And that's very important for cyclists to know what their rights are, and for motorists to know what the cyclist rights are. And it also is cycling rights, which means how does a cyclist legally and practically ride? And that is the main gist of this book. It has information that all cyclists should know before they go out on the road.
Excellent. Can you talk to us a little bit about, hold on one second here. Can you talk with us a little bit about, what's in the content of the book?
Sure. As you can see, it's got a lot of chapters in it. It's 145 pages long. And it starts out with a foreword by a very good friend of mine, Mark Looney, who I rode the Ohio to Erie Trail with. And he starts off with a nice foreword about Cleveland. The first chapter is about cyclist rights, that we have an absolute right to ride on the road. And we have sites for everything in the book. We have sites at the back of the book. So we have an absolute right to ride on the roads except on the highways. And there's signs that say you can't enter a highway. So that means we can ride in the metro parks. Nothing upsets me more than I'm riding in the metro parks and I hear motorist A, B, or C, get off the bike, get off the road, get on the bike trail. Well, you don't know the law because we have an absolute right to ride on the road, even in the metro parks. And there's a picture illustrating that we absolutely can't be forced to ride on the sidewalk. It's prohibited in business districts. So you can never say, hey, get on the sidewalk. We cannot be forced to ride on the sidewalk, and a lot of cities prohibit us riding in there. And then I talk about cyclist responsibility. Big thing here. I don't want to give away everything in the whole book, so I'm going to shorten this up. But the big thing about a bike is it's a vehicle. It's defined in the Ohio Revised Code as a vehicle. So if you look at a bike as a vehicle and you follow the rules of the road, you drive in the direction of traffic, you drive similar to the way you drive a motor vehicle, you will be much better off and you will have the right of way in that situation. And that's one of my major messages. I talk about where cyclists should ride on the road. Do we have to wear helmets? What if you get a traffic ticket? What if you get a DUI? Is there a difference? And yes, there is. We talk about the 3-foot passing law. I talk about the dead red light law, not to be confused with, you can go through any red light. Super important. I talk about lights that bothers me. My office is here on Madison. It's sundown, and I see a lot of cyclists without lights on at night, and that's an absolute must. I talk about road situations encountered by cyclists, how to make a right turn, how to make a left turn, why there's bike boxes there to eliminate the drama of the left turn, what to do at an intersection, what is a shero, what's a bike lane, what's the difference. And there's a chapter there for the motorists, okay? And we all are on these roads together, and it's important for motorists to know why we do what we do. So I have a whole chapter about that, why we're in pace lines, why drafting helps cyclists move quicker, how to pass us correctly, why we point down on the road for obstacles, what filtering means, why we might go through some stop signs or some red lights. Obviously in Idaho, stop signs are used as yields, and in Idaho, red lights are like stop signs, but here in Ohio, they are stop signs and red lights that have to be abided by. I talk about their responsibility as a motorist to be aware of us, to detect us, and to know that we have an absolute right to ride on the road. We're not in their way, we're on their way. And I request motorists not to drive distracted because that's how a lot of these accidents are happening. And I implore that Ohio makes driving distracted a primary offense instead of a secondary offense. I talk about dooring. I was on TV about dooring and how to avoid it. And if you're in a dooring crash, what to do if you're a cyclist. Speaking of crashes, I talk about them. There's so many of them, they even have names. There's the rear ender, the left cross, the right hook two. They have to respect us as legal road vehicles. And there's also chapters and sections of what a cyclist might do to try to mitigate the lack of detection by the motorist. And there's even a section on riding on all-purpose trails. And of course, there is the Stobie shout rule with his picture in there. Again, there's a section about cyclists when you're hit by an unsafe motorist, what you do. And I have cards for that that are in every book. And what are your damages if you're hit? The big thing about that is your bike is evidence, your helmet's evidence. If you get hit, you save all the bike damage and the helmet evidence, and you look for video footage. And I talk about another very important thing, what type of insurance all cyclists should have. It's super important. Most cyclists don't know what they should have or shouldn't have. Another interesting chapter is real Ohio bike cases. These are actual, real, reported Ohio bike cases where the police cite the cyclist, where a motorist is charged for a felony for hitting a cyclist, where a cyclist is injured on a sidewalk defect, where there's an injury on a bike trail, in the Miami Valley Bike Trail, where there's an injury from a road defect, where there's the wrongful death of a young cyclist and there was no civil liability on the driver. Another section on crash statistics, and we know they're going up recently around because of the increase in cycling and distracted driving. I talk about e-bikes, what they are, what classes they are. And this is a funny part of this thing, you know, e-bikes became mountain e-bikes. I'm thinking, well, an e-bike's not even allowed in the Cuyahoga Valley National Park when I wrote the book. However, within the last couple of weeks, the Cuyahoga Valley National Park now allows e-bikes class 1 and 2 on the mountain bike trails. I talk about micromobility devices, the bird, lime, and the wheels. Big thing there is if you ride these things, you better have homeowners insurance or renter's insurance, because if you hit someone, you're going to be at fault. And you should have insurance to protect yourself if you are hit by a negligent motorist that doesn't have insurance or is uninsured. There's a big section on autonomous vehicles. Big thing there is they're not ready for the road yet. They can't detect cyclists. In all the tests, they're hitting them left and right. Finally, there's a new section on all the new laws and programs that are geared toward bike safety on the local, the federal, and the state level. And it wraps up in a peculiar way. And the question is it worth it? Is it worth it to go out there and bicycle when things could happen to you and you're not respected and so on and so forth? And the answer we came to is a clear yes. I mean, cycling improves air quality through lack of emissions. It improves water quality. There's no oil and gas getting into the water system. It improves your livability, and it gives you a bunch of health benefits, like a 41% better health rate if you exercise and ride a bike. So that's what the book is about. And I hope that it covers almost everything every cyclist and every motorist should know about cycling and micromobility devices.
Yeah, excellent. I know one of my favorite chapters was number 4 for the motorist, because I know a lot of the issues and questions you bring up in there are issues that I have to answer for a lot of folks, either through email or through phone calls we get at the office of, why are those bikes in the road or what are they doing? So it was really good. I can just point people to that chapter in your book whenever they ask me the question.
Yeah, the worst ones of all are that when a cyclist is hurt or injured, they deserve it for riding on the road. That is the worst thing I've ever heard. Yeah, from a motorist.
Yeah. So I have one more question, and then we're going to take some questions from some of the participants. So if you're on the call and you have a question, feel free to throw it in the chat, or once we go through the ones in the chat, we'll allow you to unmute yourself and you can ask your question in person. So Ken, my last question for you is, what do you really hope to achieve through this book?
Well, there is a licensing procedure when you get your car license. You go through training and you have to pass a test. There is little to no information about bicycling or the rights of cyclists when you take your driver's education test. To ride a bicycle, you don't need to take a driver's education test. There is none. Okay, so to me, there is a gap in knowledge, okay, between the motorist who's driving a car that doesn't know about bikes and bike law and the cyclist who's riding a bike who never had to learn about bike law. And I feel there is a gap. And what I hope to achieve with this book is to fill in the gap with the knowledge on both sides, what the motorist needs to know about cyclists and what cyclists need to know about the law to be safer on the road so that there's less damage to either party on the road, and it's safer for all road users, especially the vulnerable road users, which are us cyclists.
Yeah, absolutely. Excellently said, Ken. So we'll open it up to questions from folks in our room. I see one question in the chat so far. It says, Ken stated that bikes aren't allowed on the highways, but can you speak to limited access roads like the West Shoreway?
Hey, Mitch, that is a very good question. If you look in the book, in one of the first couple of pages, the first sign I show is the Shoreway sign that says you cannot access the Shoreway because it is a limited access road. And that means that there's exits and entrance onto that road. So that is one that has a clear sign right there at Edgewater Park that you can't enter it. And I'm sure there's another one over by Don's Lighthouse that says you can't ride your bike on that. But that's a very good question.
Yeah. Yeah. If anybody has any questions in the audience, you can feel free to unmute yourself, ideally one at a time, and ask Ken a question.
I have a comment. Kenny,
Yes, Andy.
congratulations.
What?
Congratulations.
Thank you.
First and foremost, I want to congratulate you because I know how much time and effort goes into writing a book. And from what I've seen, it's, you should be really proud of this. The other thing is you didn't really talk about it, but I know what you've done, not from a profit perspective, but just to help others. The bike shops, the motorists. You didn't really, I don't know if maybe you don't want to talk about that, but I really give you a lot of credit for the contributions that you're making to the community, to the industry. Clearly, this is a passion, something you do out of love. It's not something you're doing for the money. And I just want to commend you for that.
Hey, thanks, Andy. I do want to say that all profits from the book are going to Bike Cleveland and bike shops and organizations and bike clubs. I don't intend to make a penny out of this book other than to get it out into the public. So I greatly appreciate that. And Andy is an author himself who wrote an absolute fantastic book. Captured in Liberation. I always forget the name of it. It's about his father in World War II when Germany and Russia invaded Poland. It is absolute super read, and I highly recommend it.
Excellent.
Callie, you got a question? You're on mute, Callie. There you go.
Yeah, thanks, Ken, and congratulations. Also, I'd like to send the thanks of all the contributions that you make to our work in Cleveland. I'm curious about the definition of a bicycle as a vehicle, which you talked about. I don't think scooters are explicitly defined as vehicles, but we do expect them to follow a lot of the same rules on the road as bikes. And I'm wondering if there's anything that is not included or does not apply to a scooter because it's not technically defined as a vehicle, or if you would recommend that we update our code to explicitly define scooters as vehicles.
Well, the way I understand it, Callie, is you kind of apply the same laws to e-scooters as you do for bicycles, but you don't specifically define them as vehicles. So yes, I would highly recommend that the city of Cleveland do that to make it clear, because otherwise it becomes a little bit muddy. So yes, I am totally in with you on that.
Thanks.
Cool. Thanks, Callie. There's a question in here about helmet recommendations and what to look for in helmet specifications.
That's a really good question. Bike shop people could probably answer it as well or better than I can. I personally look for a bike that has MIPS, a multiple impact protection system, which is supposed to help in case you fall or get hit and you hit your head. There's also some other new technology that's out, and I just make sure any helmet I buy has at the very least MIPS in it. There is no law in Ohio requiring you to wear a helmet, although it's a very, very good idea for obvious reasons. Minors are required in some cities to wear helmets, and in Shaker Heights, they actually require adults to wear helmets, but generally there is no federal or state law that requires wearing a helmet. I have seen so many bike crashes where I say, can you please let me see your helmet? Oh, well, there's nothing wrong with it. And I look at that helmet, turn it around and look on the inside, and the styrofoam is cracked. And I think, my God, that would have been your head that's cracked. Thank God it's the styrofoam. So that's about all I know about helmets.
Cool. Cool. There's a question on here from Ben Van Leer. I know you've been working on this stuff for a long time, but was there anything surprising you learned researching or investigating things for the book?
Let's see. You know, I want to say yes, but you know, not really. I mean, I knew the crash statistics were up. I really got to know the infrastructure better about bike boxes and why they're there, and you know, the efficacy of excuse me, bike lanes and protected bike lanes. But you know, I did learn a lot in doing it. But did anything come out of the blue? Probably just those things.
Cool. Cool. This is something I'd probably be interested in too. Any tips on drafting? How do you keep from crashing into the rider in front of you?
Drafting is a skill that really depends on the cyclist in front of you. You have to know that cyclist and trust him. You have to be able to look forward and down at the same time. Once you get into that rhythm and you know the cyclist in front of you and no one's doing any sudden stops or maneuvers that are not well telegraphed, it can be done. It can be done fairly simply, although I've seen a lot of cyclists that are afraid to do it, and as a result, they don't keep up because you get a lot of extra benefit from doing that.
Yeah, yeah, cool. What are the laws regarding pedestrians jogging in bike lanes? Are they allowed to run in the streets or in specified bike lanes?
Well, we talked about that, Jacob, you and I think that your sister or someone has a bike lane near their house, and the only access without sidewalks is the bike lane, and they use it.
Yep.
Is that a fair statement?
That's correct.
Yeah, generally, if there are sidewalks and it's just the road, the bike lane is the bike lane. That's my opinion. If you're somewhere where there is no other access and you use the bike lane, I think that's fine too. But generally, pedestrians in city streets should not be jogging in and out of the bike lanes. They're specifically designed for bikes.
Yeah. What about using cameras when you're riding to record poor driving habits? Does this help in suits or cases or anything like that?
Absolutely. It's evidence. It's great evidence. And you can put them on the front of your bike or on the back of your bike, and it's a great thing. They cost money and they weigh a little bit. But are they helpful devices to have on your bike? Yes, absolutely. And can they be used in evidence? Yes, because a lot of times an accident will happen and the driver will say, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it, I'm all at fault, and then they drive off, or the police come and all of a sudden they change their story. The great thing about it is if you have a camera, they can't change the story. The story's there in black and white.
Yeah. I'd say it's the same for a lot of street cameras or business cameras as well. I know there was a case in Cleveland where a cyclist was hit and there was a camera on a nearby business that actually caused the police to have to change the police report because it was filed incorrectly after they realized from the camera footage what had happened.
Yeah, a friend of mine has that, and they did a great job in locating the footage. In a lot of cities, I mean, Lakewood has cameras all over the place. Any bike crash in Lakewood, we're on those cameras, and other cities are doing the same. Not even, just the city itself, besides the buildings. They have to look in both places.
Yep. Yep. How should we, as cyclists, act as a vehicle when in traffic? As an example, like passing cars when stopped at a traffic light.
Well, that's, to put it in context, you're talking about filtering, you're talking about passing a stopped car. I mean, you should ride your bike like you do a vehicle. If there's a specific bike lane, you can ride right up to that light and pass the other cars. If there is no bike lane, technically you're supposed to stay in your own lane to get up and move, through the intersection. So it really depends on the circumstances. When you're a vehicle and you're riding in traffic, ride to the right side, to the right of the road and stay with the traffic, go with the lane of traffic. If you're in the bike lane, you have more rights and responsibility. You can use that bike lane, and the cars are not supposed to enter that bike lane to impede your movement or to turn in front of you. Especially the city of Cleveland has a great statute on that. And it's actually called an ordinance.
Another question, how do you approach motorists and cyclists that are clearly riding or driving against the rules of the road? For example, like wrong way cyclists or motorists yelling at cyclists or purposely blocking or obstructing bikes?
Man, that's a lot of questions. Can you break it down?
Yeah, so how do you address, we'll start with the cyclist side. So you're biking down Madison and you see a cyclist salmoning down the bike lane. How do you address that?
Well, that's a tough one. I always say something, and sometimes they think I'm like anti-cyclist and I'm yelling at them like the motorists do. But I try to tell them, hey, you're going the wrong way, or hey, you need a light. And I don't mean it to be mean. I mean it to actually help these people because they're obviously doing something that's dangerous and could result in an accident or injury. So I try to tell them the best thing I can do is do what I'm doing, writing a book, getting the information out, having Bike Cleveland tell these people how to ride correctly. But it is a problem, and then motorists see it and they then attribute that kind of conduct to all of us, and it doesn't help anybody.
Yeah. And then what about, right. And then what about like, you're riding in the metro parks and you see a motorist just, yelling at cyclists or weaving towards them.
Yeah.
What do you do in that kind of situation?
Well, obviously, you're on display when you're riding your bike in the metro parks. It's not just the motorist and you, it's passerbys, it's people on the trail, it's other motorists. So how do you conduct yourself? You realize this is not just between you and him and who's going to take the high road. So when those situations occur, yelling back at them doesn't help. It just makes you look bad. But saying, something like share the road, or if they get very verbally aggressive, taking your camera out and just filming them yelling at you is a better way to go. Now, this is easier said than done. I mean, people screaming at you that are out of their minds and trying to like move you off the road. It's very troubling, and you can react, and God knows I may have reacted in inappropriate ways at times, but if you want the right answer, the best way to do it is to stay calm and cool and get your phone out and call 911 if it gets too crazy.
All right. What legal standing does a cyclist have when using a shoulder, not designated bike lane? I heard recently that they have the same legal standing as a pedestrian. Is that right?
Well, that's a complex question. When you're riding in the shoulder, the issue is, are you riding on the road? You have a legal right to ride on the road, but you don't have a legal right to ride on the shoulder like you do on the road. So in a lot of situations, you might want to ride on the shoulder because you feel it's safer. Technically and legally, if you want the right of way, you should be in the road. But that doesn't mean if you're riding in the shoulder and someone hits you, they can get away with it. It's just that the definition of the road in two different places in the code sometimes includes the shoulder and sometimes doesn't. So that's why there is a little bit of a concern if you're riding in the shoulder and then maybe you do not have the rights of a vehicle and then maybe you only have the rights of pedestrians. So that is possible.
I learn something new every day. That's interesting because in some of like the AASHTO bike facility design guide, they talk about widened shoulders when there's not a space for a bike facility. So in some instances, I imagine, wide shoulders are designed that way for people biking in addition to walking.
Well, I was in Utah on a 55-mile-an-hour road, and it was a 2-lane road, and I could ride on the shoulder or I could ride on the road. And I was riding on the road. I thought, I'm going to get in the shoulder, and sure enough, a car passed another car, and it would have killed me had I been staying in the road. So it can go both ways.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Oh, hi, Alyssa Bowles. Ken, I'm so proud of you. I'm excited about your new book. I got my copy today through Bike Cleveland.
Glad to hear.
And in Euclid, the city council just passed the legislation that the county was seeking individual municipalities to pass to allow scooters and e-bikes to wander into our city. But something that's a little different about Euclid is they did not require that the scooters ride in the street like Cleveland does. But in Euclid, we still have a rule just like in Cleveland where bikes can't ride in the business district on the sidewalks.
Right.
So what seems off to me is that the scooters are allowed to ride on the sidewalks in business districts and the bikes are not. So I was wondering what your opinion was about which of those laws should change to make them equal. Should scooters be allowed on sidewalks, or should we change the law and allow bikes on the sidewalks?
Good question, Alyssa. Everywhere where I've seen, including the city of Cleveland, they're treated like bikes. So to allow scooters now to ride in a business district and not allow bikes is completely out of whack. So I don't think that makes any sense. They should be treated the same, or it's going to get real confusing. So I don't know why the city of Euclid would do that, but I'm not for it.
Well, they want to be more open for the new scooters, and it would take an additional action to change that law about bikes. But then I'm worried about pedestrian safety. I think that's the reason that it was originally outlawed, because you don't want bikes flying by a coffee shop. Somebody comes out of the coffee shop with coffee in their hand and boom. Or, you don't want to play chicken with somebody in a walker or a parent with a stroller. So
well,
I'm a little torn on which side to advocate for.
Anytime a cyclist is riding on the sidewalk, the pedestrians have the right of way. Absolutely. So
we still have that law in place. If there's an accident, one would be liable.
Right, and they are, if in business districts, I think they just feel that there's more people and more situations. But business district is a broad definition, and there's some business districts that cyclists should be able to allow to ride in that aren't heavy populated, but that's the law. So.
An issue I've always had with Cleveland since the bikes and the scooters came out is bikes and scooters are not supposed to be on the sidewalks in business districts, but they are anyway. And then you have those rental bikes. I won't say the company or the hospital that puts them out there, but they're on the sidewalks. It seems like maybe they should change that law in Cleveland too, since that's what people do anyway.
You mean they leave them on the sidewalks, or what do you mean?
There's bikes.
Yeah.
There's bikes on the sidewalks for people to rent for people who work downtown or tourists. Another issue I have with all of these things is they don't come with helmets, and people don't usually have a helmet with them when they're running these things. But they're on the sidewalks, right by the convention center, for example. And I think the average tourist would ride the bike on the sidewalk, especially since they rented the bike, which was parked on the sidewalk. I've always thought that was kind of confusing and inconsistent.
Yeah, I agree.
But as a pedestrian in Cleveland, I don't really like having to dodge bikes and scooters. I'm really torn on the issue. I just think fundamentally, which was the first thing you said, I think that they should be treated equal, whatever way that the city goes with it.
I agree.
Hey, Ken, it's Annalisa. So like you had said that in Shaker, you have to wear a helmet. I think there's like a lot of municipality rules like that around. Like I ran into an issue with like in Parma, you're allowed to ride bikes on the sidewalk, but other places you're not allowed to. Are there any other like weird things like that you know of that we should be aware of?
You mean weird laws like that or what?
Yes. Yeah. Like
I
Shaker,
think-
you have to have a helmet, and I think in Shaker you have to ride single file too, right?
We're gonna try her out. So we're gonna see what this looks like with her.
Diane is on the screen right now, going into her car. I think Gase Mills still has you can't ride two abreast law, which is totally bogus, and because it conflicts with the Ohio law. But there are bits and pieces of old time bike laws spread throughout the state of Ohio that are still in existence, although they're getting up to speed. I mean, they can't conflict with the Ohio Revised Code, yet they still do. And that's the key thing there, is that's why they're not valid. There's also a case where a city gave a more broader law. They said you didn't have a bike light till an hour after sunrise, and the court struck that down as conflicting with the Ohio Revised Code that says you have to have it at sunrise. So it goes both ways.
Yeah.
A lot of those old city laws and ordinances are out of date and inaccurate and probably not valid.
I have a question real quick, if I could.
Yeah, I was going to add to Ken's real quick. We often push municipalities that have those old archaic laws that are in conflict with the Ohio Revised Code to get rid of them. Solon's another example that has a single file requirement for cyclists. And then real quick, to answer Alyssa's question, Alyssa, I think a lot of it is, people ride the scooters and the bikes on the sidewalk because they don't feel comfortable or safe in the streets. I think if you're looking to advocate for something, advocate for making the streets safer so that people then feel more comfortable riding in the roadway versus on the sidewalks where, it should be, dominated more by pedestrians and not people biking.
That's
and
exactly
scooting.
what I did speaking at council. I reminded people of the Midway project kind of idea. Ideally, we have infrastructure where we have bikes, sidewalks, and a separate protected area for bikes. But given our current infrastructure, at the very least, scooters should not get better treatment than bicycles, even for just transportation equity. I mean, scooters are kind of a yuppie thing, right? Like you have to have a credit card, you have to have a driver's license. You're just not going to have like all the same people who are able to use those. And then somebody who's on a bike, they're at risk to get a criminal citation. That just looks like a disaster waiting to happen.
Yeah, the roads are made for cars, and places like Bike Cleveland and cities are now making bike infrastructure and other infrastructure that would help scooters get into the road safely.
Yeah. Somebody had a question, they spoke up?
Yeah, I do. I'm in Twinsburg, and there are several roundabouts right close to my apartment. Motorists and cyclists clearly don't know how to use roundabouts. I know that's been an issue with a lot of people. I've nearly been hit in front of Heinen's here in Twinsburg a couple times when I'm on the inside lane. I've had motorists scream at me that, bikes don't belong on the road, bicycles aren't vehicles. And the way I see it, as long as I'm on the inside lane and I'm hand signaling, I shouldn't have people pull out in front of me or stop in front of me. I've just had real issues with roundabouts. I wonder if you've had any experience with that, or if you have any insights regarding that.
What you're saying doesn't surprise me at all, but those people that are yelling at you are wrong. You're a vehicle and you can proceed around that roundabout just like any other vehicle. And you have the right of way as long as you're in your lane, in the proper lane, with the proper placement. So it's just a difficult area for motorists and cyclists to coexist together. And because of that, I guess they're blaming you, blaming the cyclists, because you're totally in the right.
Where there are share roads, do you recommend taking the center of the lane or staying to the right side of the lane?
If the lane is too narrow for a car to safely pass you, I would take the whole lane with the share. If the lane is not so narrow that a car can safely pass you, I would stay to the right.
Yeah. All right, last question. How do you handle a cop trying to give you a speeding ticket when you're riding your bike? Can you use ID other than your driver's license?
Well, then we get into the police stopping the cyclist, and they're going to ask you for your driver's license. And under the law, they can give you a ticket for speeding because you're a vehicle. So I would think in that situation, if you own a driver's license, you'd have to give it to them because they actually can give you a ticket for doing that. Can you use other ID other than a driver's license? I mean, you get stopped in your car and you try to give a different ID than your driver's license, ain't gonna work.
Yeah. I think it's also important to note there, though, that if you do get pulled over for speeding on your bicycle, and Ken, correct me if I'm wrong, you cannot get points on your license unless you're under the influence.
That's totally correct. Unless you're DUI, you can't get points, but a lot of judges, juries, not juries, a lot of police and courts do not know that that is the law. So it has to be clear on your ticket that you are riding your bicycle, so you do not get any points. If, however, it is a DUI situation, you get all the points and all the accoutrements that come with the DUI, even if you're on a bike, and they're not good.
Cool. Cool. All right. So, Ken, is there anything else you want to say in closing?
Looking at anything else here. No, I really hope that people can pick up this book, have it as a resource. We also have a online copy too. It's going to be available, but we are constantly updating all the sites on my website. So if something changes, like mountain bikes in the Knabe Valley National Park, it will be on our website. So I really hope that we can support our cycling community, especially Bike Cleveland, by buying these books and filling in that gap of knowledge so that we know what we're doing and we have the power out on the road to know what to do and what not to do.
Ken, I just wanted to thank you for always being a strong supporter, not only of Bike Cleveland, but of the cycling community as a whole. You can always, whenever I call you, you always answer with sometimes my crazy questions. You always sponsor whenever we ask. And, I think your impact on the cycling community across the region, is truly felt. And I think, this book is really just another one of those opportunities, helping both inform cyclists, but motorists on their rights out on the road. So thanks a lot, Ken.
Well, thank you, Jacob. Love you, man.
Love you too. I love you too. So for everybody on the call, if you're if you're interested in learning more about Bike Cleveland, you can go to our website, bikecleveland.org. You can also purchase the book on there. And our next activity is actually Random Acts of Brightness, which I know is an event Ken loves, where we actually are headed out into Public Square, downtown Cleveland, and in University Circle to give lights to riders that are riding around the community unlit. So if you want to learn more about that, you can go to our website under events, and you can either sign up to volunteer or spread the word to some folks that are out riding without lights.
On my Facebook too, if you want to buy a book, it goes directly to Bike Cleveland.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks, everybody.
Thank you.